Hello everyone. In the series of e-learning classes for CVPAC students, I am presenting today is a new topic named as cholesteatoma. My name is Dr. Atul Bharadwaj. I am faculty as assistant professor in Chaudhary Brahmprakash Ayurved Charak Sansthan. And today's topic of cholesteatoma is a unique one because it is so much more discussed topic in ENT fraternity, whereas this topic is not much discussed in undergraduate sense. So today we are going to start this new topic. Let me open this. This is cholesteatoma. So unique the sense is cholesteatoma because the introduction of this disorder is in the final prof only for the ENT students, and most of the ENT surgery and radiological practices of a ENT OPD depends upon this disorder. Most of the surgical implications of otology are concerned with cholesteatoma. It's a unique disorder also in a sense that it's a at the same time it's a autoimmune response of the middle ear mucosa, plus it has also got a unique inflammatory sequence as well attached to it. So it is a autoimmune as well as a you can say a inflammatory response of the middle ear mucosa to variety of skin element. Yes, that is totally a unique factor, because nowhere in the disease you are having a immune response to a migration of a skin. What is cholesteatoma? We'll discuss in detail. So let me check the pointer or pen option. So this is the today's topic is cholesteatoma, being its a multiplicity of approaches in the surgical practice. This cholesteatoma presents a unique challenge to ENT practitioners as well. But for the students, for the beginners, it's a difficult topic to understand in a 15 or 20 minute of class. So we will perhaps divide this lecture into 2 or 3 classes. In the first segment, we will comprehend about what cholesteatoma actually is. In the second class, we will go with the clinical picture of the cholesteatoma, and probably in the third segment of our lecture, we will discuss about some complication elements of the cholesteatoma. So cholesteatoma is such a familiar word to every otologist. We used to see this pathology in endoscopic picture virtually in every day in many patients. So it's a wonderful, fascinating disorder as well for the ENT surgeons. Most of the surgery we do is a cholesteatoma surgery, especially if you have to sacrifice the ossicular chain. Cholesteatoma is the prime cause of that. You have to do a cholesteatoma surgery. Then you have to have a good 3D-dimensional anatomical sense of the middle ear, especially facial nerve. So what precisely is cholesteatoma is? So it's a misnomer. To start with, it's a misnomer. It's neither a tumor, as the word suggests. Oma is it's not a tumor, even a benign or a malignant one, and nor it has got a cholesterol crystal. So it's a name which was coined by Mueller in 19th century, and the name is still continuing in the ENT fraternity throughout the globe. But it's not a tumor, nor it's something to do with the cholesterol crystals. The previous popular name was also epidermosis and keratoma. Also, epidermosis is a where this is a pinna, and this is canal, and this is tympanic membrane, and this is middle ear. So this pathology by and large is it caters the migration of a keratinized squamous epithelium. You are well aware of the fact that our canal or external auditory canal has got nothing but a a keratinized squamous epithelium like our hands or the skin of our hands or extremity has got. So the tympanic outer part in the sense is outer layer is epithelial layer, which is again keratinized squamous epithelium. Apart from that, the canal also has got a keratinized squamous epithelium and is passed on the pinna skin as well. Whereas middle layer mucosa is a totally different mucosa. That is a mucosa, that is a skin. So the mucosa essentially of the middle layer is cuboidal plus essentially a respiratory epithelium. Respiratory epithelium, what is respiratory epithelium? Respiratory epithelium is the same epithelium which is responsible for mucociliary clearance mechanism or MMCM, and it extends from middle ear to the mastoid air cells to the eustachian tube to the some part of the inferior part of the trachea and up to the alveoli. There is a continuation of this respiratory epithelium which has got a unique quality of mucociliary clearance mechanism, presence of goblet cells and hair cells, beating of the cilias are present. So presence of the cilias is a unique feature of the middle ear epithelium, whereas the canal has got a keratinized squamous epithelium. So the migration through the tympanic membrane perforation or through the attic segment of the tympanic membrane. Attic is the superior part of the tympanic membrane, also called as pars flaccida. So migration of this canal skin or keratinized squamous epithelium either through the pars flaccida, making its own window into the middle ear mucosa, or through the tympanic membrane perforation is called as cholesteatoma. So cholesteatoma, the word is not suggestive of the features of the disease. Epidermosis is a epidermal or a keratinized squamous epithelium, a tumor-like sense you can take it from epidermosis. Keratoma again is a word which is suggestive of it's a tumor which has got a squamous epithelium, keratinized squamous epithelium. A very popular again saying in ENT practice, it's a skin in the wrong place. Skin in the wrong place, why it is called so? Because the external auditory canal and the outer surface of the tympanic membrane has got keratinized squamous epithelium. That too, like we can see in this in depiction of this skin of the canal, this is tympanic membrane, this is skin of the canal. So there is a constant shifting of this canal skin from the tympanic membrane mid part to the outer part of the canal. This is called as canal skin shifting mechanism, or like a conveyor belt, it shifts from medial part of the ear to the outer part of the external ear. So this constant conveyor belt mechanism or shifting of the canal epithelium from medial to lateral is is a normal phenomena. So if you mark your tympanic membrane with some marker, it will come out in about 21 days and will be visible on the pinna skin. So this constant shifting of this keratinized squamous epithelium, which is shaded in the senses, which is desquamatized. Desquamatization is a normal process in keratinized squamous epithelium. Some part of the canal or tympanic membrane, it is more pronounced, and some part of the tympanic membrane or canal, it is less pronounced. But in the pars flaccida of the tympanic membrane, you are well aware of the fact that the superior part of the tympanic membrane is pars flaccida segment. So this desquamatization means shedding of the keratinized squamous epithelium. The shedding of the keratinized squamous epithelium is far more enhanced, augmented, and visible in the pars flaccida segment rather than the pars tensa segment. So this pars flaccida segment, also called as Sharpnell's membrane, has got a much pronounced shedding or desquamatization in comparison to of the pars tensa part. So this constant shifting of this shedded epithelium from medial to lateral is a common mechanism, and our wax and other secretions by pilosebaceous glands rides on this shifting mechanism. So you need not to have to remove your ear wax time and again, but in some cases where there is a failure of this migration mechanism, or the patient has underwent any kind of a surgery, or pathologies of canal skin. There is a failure of this shifting mechanism and there is impaction or retention of the wax. But in most of the normal routine cases, we have got a successful canal shifting mechanism of what? Of this keratinized squamous epithelium from medial to lateral, which is a normal phenomena. So what is this cholesteatoma? It is made up of this is a histological picture of the cholesteatoma. This is the nucleus, you can say the central part, which has got a keratin mass. Keratin is a hard. Keratin means rough and hard, and which is intermittent part is this intermediate part is a base like a basal lamella. This is called as matrix, and it is surrounded by a halo of fibrous stroma. So that is the histological picture of this growth itself, this cholesteatoma itself. It's not a tumor. It's a conglomeration or aggregation or a collection of shedded or desquamated epithelial cells, which migrates as a whole or as a part into the middle ear mucosa or middle ear or the tympanum rather, from the canal or the outer surface of the tympanic membrane, is called as cholesteatoma. So we will see the detail, and this can be very well appreciated with a diagram. Let me show it. So this is a schematic diagram, and this is the tympanic membrane. You can easily appreciate, and this is the canal skin. This canal skin is, again I will emphasize, is keratinized squamous epithelium. And it has got two properties. Number one property, that it sheds or desquamates, plus it shifts from medial to lateral. That is a routine observation or a routine phenomena. So some part of the tympanic membrane, like a pars flaccida segment, has got a pronounced shedding of the epithelium or desquamatization of the epithelium, and the pars tensa segment has relatively less shedding or desquamatization of the keratinized squamous epithelium. So what happens, like you see in this case, this is a tympanic membrane, and this is a middle ear, and this is a canal. So in routine condition, this migration of this keratinized squamous epithelium happens to be a normal behavior of the canal, and there is no retention of the shedded epithelium somewhere on the tympanic membrane. But what happens when there is a negative pressure in the middle ear through the eustachian tube? Obviously, this negative pressure leads to retention, the retraction of the tympanic membrane. Retraction word, as I have already explained in the previous classes, is medialization of the tympanic membrane. When there is medialization of the tympanic membrane, this effectively shedding of the epithelium and migration of the epithelium is compromised, and there is a collection of this shedded or desquamated epithelium in this retraction pocket, which forms a future cholesteatoma. So this question may be asked, how can a retention of these simple squamous epithelium have to do with the pathology? But this is not simple collection or conglomeration of cells of squamous epithelium. They altogether behave differently when they are subjected to inflammatory response and enzymatic action of these cells. They behave altogether differently because of a superadded bacterial infection in the cells as a matrix, and also the enzymatic cell secretions or the enzymatic activity which is shown by this group of cells, these shedded cells. And this enzymatic action makes a way into the middle ear and then goes preferentially, which depends upon the ligament and the anatomy of the middle ear or the pathways of the ventilation pathway of the middle ear. Depending upon the structure encountered, it can move. Mostly it moves towards the mastoid antrum, but it can encroach or erode or disturb or destroy the roof, the mid-layer wall, anywhere. Most of the cases it destroys the long process, the incus. So in extreme cases it destroys everything in the mid layer. So but the foot plate of the stapes remains, because if it will collapse, then the perilymph will come out and the patient will have a deaf ear. So in extreme cases or advanced cases of the disease, it can destroy all this cholesteatoma after migrating into the mid layer, changes its behavior by virtue of presence of various enzymes. The most prominent is ACE, acid collagenase phosphatase, ACP, sorry. ACP is acid collagenase phosphatase, which is an enzyme present in the cholesteatoma matrix, which is responsible for the destruction of the surroundings of the mid-layer anatomy, which is present around the cholesteatoma structure or the cholesteatoma matrix. So it starts with a negative retraction pocket, and this negative retraction pocket leads to collection of the desquamated epithelium, and this desquamated epithelium changes its behavior. It fills as a sac, and this sac actively engages the tympanic membrane, perforates it, make way of itself into the mid layer, and then it can destroy everything which came in the way of expansion of the cholesteatoma by virtue of presence of different enzymatic action, as well as because of the compression of the blood vessels of the underlying bones. So the mucosa, let me show it by, but we will discuss in we have got two theories, but first of all, let me go along with the, so there are different theories of how this cholesteatoma generates. These are coronary theories, Wiesel's theory, Wittmach's theory, but most of the theories are now restricted to the retraction pocket behavior of the pars flaccida, and this is embryonic epithelial cells which are present in the mid layer as a detachment of the mesodermal cells, uh, which subsequently regenerates to form a tumor in the mid layer. So we will talk about congenital cholesteatoma, which is an example of an embryological origin of these rudimentary mesodermal cells, and which proliferates or you can say fulminates to form a tumor, which is not migrated from the canal, which is found from the embryonic resting cells which are present in the mid-layer mucosa already at the time of birth only. So there is also an implantation theory, but we'll discuss about the classification of the cholesteatoma. Then you will have a larger picture or a bird eye view of how this cholesteatoma actually progresses and invade or encroaches or eroded the middle ear structures. So this is a picture of a congenital cholesteatoma. We will discuss the most common cholesteatoma first, then we will move on to the pediatric population cholesteatoma, that is a congenital cholesteatoma later on. So what is a acquired cholesteatoma? The difference between, this is pinna, this is canal, and this will be the mid layer. This will be the tympanic membrane. Acquired is when the cholesteatoma matrix actually migrates from the canal to the mid layer. That will be the acquired. And congenital is when there is already the presence of these epidermal cells, and which later on proliferates to form a cholesteatoma growth. So the difference between acquired is which is acquired from the canal, either through a perforation. So likewise, we can see that the tympanic membrane, there's a small central perforation, a medium size central perforation, a large central perforation. According to the size of the perforation, you can nominate it, and a total perforation, which also includes the annulus. So these are some central perforation, and this is an example of a marginal perforation, when there is a destruction of the marginal part of the tympanic membrane, and it includes the annulus also. What is annulus? Annulus is a thickened circumferential part of the tympanic membrane, which has got a thickened tympanic membrane on the circumferential part, in which all of the three layers of the tympanic membrane are focused, and they are engrooved into the tympanic groove. So this marginal perforation can directly lead to migration of the keratinized squamous epithelium from the canal into the middle ear. So this migration is much easier in case of a marginal perforation than in a case of a central perforation. So we can see these two pictures, like this is the central perforation and this is a marginal perforation, and this is a canal. So along the canal, this keratinized squamous epithelium, which was supposed to go outside to the pinna side, migrates through this perforation into the middle ear. So this migration is much easier in case of a marginal perforation. So hence the marginal perforation is also unsafe perforation. Every terminology in the otology which nominates is a safe or unsafe word is used. The safety of the middle ear depends upon the presence of cholesteatoma or not. The presence of cholesteatoma makes the ear unsafe and essentially a surgical pathology. So in case of a cholesteatoma, which is very commonly encountered in ENT practice, essentially two features. It will lead to certain changes in the middle ear mucosa. It will have some destroying behavior attached to it, and it will lead to a recurrently discharging ear. Will probably also make the ear unsafe. Unsafe, what is unsafe? Unsafe in the sense is it has a property of destruction and it can destroy the roof. Then it can lead to a central nervous system extratemporal complications, and it can even erode the facial nerve of fallopian canal. Then the patient can have a, like this is a tympanic membrane, the middle ear, and the facial nerve. So he can, in the cholesteatoma matrix or the cholesteatoma tumor matrix can destroy the bony part of the canal in which the facial nerve is housed, and which can lead to a progressive palsy of the facial nerve. So these are some intratemporal complication. It can cause extratemporal complications as well, like the central nervous system complication, like meningitis or bacterial or a pyogenic meningitis, subdural abscess, extradural abscess. So these potential complications as a result of middle ear pathology almost always associated with the presence of cholesteatoma. So the presence of or absence of cholesteatoma makes the ear safe or unsafe. So every unsafe ear is associated with the presence of cholesteatoma, and hence is essentially a surgical pathology. So you have to operate the ear, or you can say that most of the otological surgery is done because of the presence of cholesteatoma. It changes the nature of the middle ear mucosa. It leads to recurrent discharges from the middle ear. It destroys the bone. It gives a periosteitis. It gives a polypoidal mucosa of the middle ear, unhealthy mucosa. It even gives a granulation of the middle ear mucosa. So a middle ear mucosa, which was supposed to be ventilated from the perforation also and the eustachian tube also, in case of cholesteatoma, it occupies the middle ear. Blockage, it blocks the adytus antrum and the promontory region to block the eustachian tube, and by and large the presence of cholesteatoma makes the middle ear mucosa hypoxic, recurrently discharging, granulomatous, and polypoidal. So the presence of cholesteatoma is the single most important factor which guides the treatment of the patient, whether it will be a wait and watch, whether it will be a patching, which will be a complete exploration with ossicoplasty. Most of the ossicoplasty are done because of the presence of cholesteatoma, because it destroys the ossicles, primarily long pros of the incus and the incus body also, and in cases it destroys even the suprasections of the stapes also. but the osteoplasty which is done is primarily because of the presence of cholesteatoma. So as far as acquired cholesteatoma is concerned, acquired is from the canal, from the canal. So we can have again so let me discuss with this picture. If you there is migration of the middle ear mucosa from canal through the tympanic membrane, either through the retraction pocket. But what is a retraction pocket? Let me first explain this to you. So let me take this. So this is a pinna, and this is canal, and this is the retraction, and this is middle ear. This retraction will lead to aggregation or collection of this desquamated epithelium into this sac, into this retraction pocket itself. And this conglomeration or aggregation of this desquamated epithelium leads to enzymatic behavior, and it gains its entry into the middle ear through a perforation caused by this matrix, and then it can destroy everything in the vicinity and its surrounding, including the facial nerve canal, overlay it, or it can enter posteriorly into the mastoid antrum. It can even go up to the cochlea and create a fistula, a pathological opening into the medial wall of the middle ear and causing a labyrinthine fistula. So these are some very important points to consider. So this entry of the keratinized squamous epithelium can have two pathways, either through a pars flaccida retraction. Pars flaccida itself is flaccid. So the pars tensa is a tense part, and it shows a relatively less amount of desquamatization, whereas pars flaccida part is engaged in much higher amount of desquamatization, because the flaccid part is flaccid because it has got only two layers, the mucosal and the epithelial layer. Pars flaccida is devoid of the intermediate layer or the fibrous layer, and it is lax or loose. And when there is a negative pressure in the middle ear, this is the part, or the pars flaccida is the part which succumbs in the senses retraction to the middle ear. Depending upon the retraction pocket, there are classification of the retraction pocket also, type 1, 2, 3, 4, according to Sadez, which is called as Sadez classification. So this retraction is the beginning of the future cholesteatoma in most of the cases, and the root of this type of spread is called as primary acquired cholesteatoma. Primary acquired cholesteatoma. There is invagination of the pars flaccida because of persistent negative pressure in the attic cause. And look at this. This is an endoscopic picture of this tympanic membrane. You can see this is obviously the superior part. This is inferior part, and this will be the posterior part. This will be the anterior part. So look in this picture, you can see the pars tensa is healthy, but the pars flaccida, there is a retraction pocket, and there is a collection of the epithelial. This yellowish part is nothing but a cholesteatoma with a prolapsed polyp. So this extensive collection of the desquamated epithelium tends to collect this cholesteatoma in the attic segment. Attic, the word attic is reserved for anything superior in the tympanic membrane or in the middle ear. So this collection leads to enzymatic behavior, and look at this expansion. This is all bone destruction around the attic, so, or Prusak space. So look at this part. This is a secondary this is called a secondary acquired cholesteatoma. It is acquired from the canal, but not through the pars flaccida. It has gone, this yellowish whitish appearance is cholesteatoma. So yellowish whitish collection is cholesteatoma. So this growth can go posteriorly into the mastoid, which mostly is the case. It can go and destroy the roof and can cause extratemporal intracranial complication. It can go medially to destroy the cochlear element and can block the eustachian tube, and already perhaps destroy the incus in this picture. This is round window. So this is a migration of a cholesteatoma through a perforation, not through the attic. When it goes through the attic by a retraction route, then it will be called as a primary acquired. And when it goes through a perforation, then it is called as secondary acquired. Most in the cases of marginal perforation, not so common in case of a central perforation. So you can now the classification stands for as congenital and acquired. Acquired again is ramified or distributed in two parts, primary and secondary, which I already explained. What is congenital then? Congenital is the presence of these epidermal cells, mesodermal epithelial cells, resting cells in the middle ear cleft already at the time of birth, and subsequently these cells which are resting in the middle ear already at the time of birth fulminates or regenerates itself to form a tumorogenic mass, which is called as a congenital cholesteatoma. So what is congenital cholesteatoma? It do not migrates from the canal or from the attic part. It is already present in the middle ear, and later on it fulminates itself, grows itself to form a tumor-like mass or a cholesteatomatous mass in the middle ear. So what are the typical present? So this presence of this epidermal cells or epithelial cells, mesodermal cells, can be up to the petrous apex and the CP angle or a cerebellopontine angle, and later on fulminates or grows or regenerates to form a tumor mass in these particular site as well. So this will be called as petrous apex cholesteatoma subsequently if it regenerates. So the definition stands as a white mass behind the intact tympanic membrane. There is no need for perforation or attic retraction. These are already present in the middle ear, and subsequently they regenerates and forms a cholesteatomatous mass in the middle ear. This is a typical hallmark of the congenital cholesteatoma, apart from a conductive hearing loss, because cochlea is normal, and there is a erosion of the Malleus stapes, and there will be no bone conduction, and hence will be a conductive hearing loss. So we will discuss the clinical segment of the cholesteatoma in the second part of this lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you for your patient listening. Thank you very much.